Okay, so to kick things off, legal makes me say this, but we're going to be talking about a little bit of trends and some future state of things. So if you'd like to read more about this note here on the screen, feel free to visit shell.com. Okay, without further ado, let's get into kind of the meat of things and what does really the current fleet landscape look like in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the challenges that you're facing. Fleet-wide and really how that's impacting business and operations. So I've just called out a couple of them. You're probably familiar and feeling of these today, but I'll talk about these because they're really going to help set the stage to really talk about the solutions we have in place that can really combat some of this, but also give you greater visibility around some of this. So the first thing, and I think it's no surprise to anyone, is that we're all facing supply chain challenges. And that's really impactful because if you think about your vehicles and how hard it is to source new vehicles right now, or even parts for vehicles and needing to maintain them longer, it's really starting to make a big impact and will for the next couple of years on our fleet makeup. And that kind of segues us into the age of vehicles. If you rewind back just a few years ago, the average age of a vehicle was only about 11 years. We've seen studies that show us 13 years, 15 years, again, needing to maintain that vehicle more. And it's not just about the maintenance, but it's the driver behind the vehicle that influences a lot of what's happening across the fleet and a lot of your expenses, which is exactly why I have the next bucket there around driver behaviors and liabilities. Your drivers are driving one of the most expensive assets to your business. And driver behaviors, whether it's rooted in speeding, harsh braking, harsh acceleration, some of those things that we do every day just because of the normal wear and tear of driving, or just because we do it subconsciously, really starts to have an impact on our bottom line. We're also seeing that with all of this happening, there is a hyper focus around sustainability. We all have our own sustainability goals and decarbonization ambitions. And so there's a focus on this, but where do we start is a lot of times the question that we get. And, what tools do I need to even start to make a transition? Maybe I'm not ready to go electric today or tomorrow, but maybe I need to start changing some things in my fleet makeup, particularly in the heavy duty space, to really combat that. So we'll talk about that. And then no surprise to anyone, the operational demands and challenges that we all face, whether they're budget related, time related, whether it's fuel related, all of those things. Something that none of these things I don't think, but especially this last one, are going away anytime soon. So again, even makes the case for why you need those tools and resources in place. Before we start talking about those, let me talk a bit more about the fuel costs and the impact that that's having and what we're seeing, and again, how we can combat that here in just a minute. So fuel costs are 60% of a fleet's total operating costs. So again, a huge chunk. So you have one of your most expensive assets that your drivers are driving, and your fuel costs make up a huge chunk of your operating expense. Now, aggressive driving, and you don't have to think of aggressive driving as in aggressive like I'm doing something wrong. It could, again, just be the normal wear and tear of trying to keep up with traffic and going to job sites and different things like that. But aggressive driving can actually decrease your fuel mileage up to 30%, or equate that to about $1 per gallon. So think about the impact that that has to the bottom line. And this is my favorite tidbit here, because we know that some idling is the nature of the business that we're in. We know that there's seasonality to idling. I live in Houston. It's really, really hot. So we have idling just because you want to circle around before you get to somewhere to stay in the air conditioning. But just 1 hour of idling in a diesel vehicle or a heavy duty vehicle can actually burn a gallon of fuel. So I say that to say that these are some not only stats and insights, but then you start to ask yourself, well, how can I influence this? How can I make a reduction? What, again, tools and resources do I need? And so we'll get there in just a second, but I want to continue our kind of insight-based conversation to start to talk about telematics a bit via connected cars. So it's a trend that we've seen from fleets and from the OEMs. We're seeing more and more when you are able to secure a vehicle and you are able to get a newer vehicle that they are a connected car. And that sounds great because connected cars give you so much more insight, but with Shell Telematics or with telematics technology, you're able to get even more. And I'll talk about that and the influence that that can have on your bottom line. So I mentioned sustainability, and whether you're at the initial stages of the sustainability journey or whether you're already saying, hey, I have electric vehicles on order, doesn't matter. We're all at some place in that spectrum, but we know that from an OEM manufacturer standpoint, there is a big push and a big focus on this. We know that this number will only continue to increase as the manufacturers and OEMs push out more electric vehicles. They become more available, particularly in the heavy duty space. Obviously, we know there's some work to be done in that space, but EV will become much more synonymous, and with EV becomes the necessity really for telematics. So one more little stat or kind of insight that I wanted to share before we go into a little bit more about Shell Telematics specifically and how Shell Fleet Solutions can support and combat some of these trends and commonalities that we're seeing. So I wanted to share a recent insight or case study with PepsiCo. I think we all know Pepsi. They have a very large fleet of heavy duty vehicles. In fact, 77,000 vehicles and units. And they use telematics. And through using the technology of telematics and the insights and the visibility that they've gained, they've been able to see a 90% reduction in accidents. I'm going to talk about how that impacts bottom line, but a 20% reduction in fuel usage, huge given what we just talked about, and a 30% reduction in idling, which is huge given if you think about a lot of the Pepsi trucks that we see are doing deliveries and have a lot of idling time by nature of the business that they're in. So I wanted to leave you with a couple of those insights as we go into the rest of today's presentation and talking about how Shell Fleet Solutions has different solutions, but particularly telematics to combat that. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the programs that Shell Fleet Solutions offers. I've put a star by Shell Telematics because that's what we're going to be discussing today and how that can really combat reducing your fuel consumption, fuel costs through having that greater visibility. So for those not super familiar with telematics, let's take a moment to kind of level set and talk about it a little bit. But regardless of the type or size or makeup, so you have 100 or 1,000 or 10, doesn't matter how many heavy duty trucks you have in your fleet, there's potential in telematics and how it can impact your bottom line. There's been quite a bit of advancement with telematics. So if you remember the early stages of GPS tracking and what it could do, it's come a heck of a long way. And there is so many data points that it can give you that can ultimately start to impact your decision making, influence policy, and really make a big impact to your bottom line. So how exactly does it work and how exactly does Shell Telematics work? Well, what we're talking about is we're talking about the actual telematics device that plugs into the OBD2 port, combined with, in our case, the Shell fuel card if you also have it, not required, but we've also integrated in that way as well. And we're taking both bits of that. So the device is pulling data from the ECM. We're taking that bit of information as well as the card if applicable, and we are pushing that into our telematics environment and giving that to you in a digestible way. And what I mean by that is telematics is fabulous, lots of data points, but those data points are hard for you to decipher and make quick decisions with everything else you have going on if you don't have a tangible way to really action it. And so we process it into really ready-made reporting for you. I'll talk about that more in just a second. So then you can take a look at that and say, well, what is happening across my vehicles in my fleet? Where are the trends? Where are the outliers? Are there things that I really need to tighten up on? Maybe this quarter, I want to really crack down on that idling. Maybe I want to look at my CO2 emissions, for example. All of those things are possible with Shell Telematics. I talked about it a little bit, but I'll go into a bit more detail. So telematics means lots of different things to you, but again, it all is impacting that bottom line. So whether it's rooted in your efficiency and wanting to do things like route optimization and making sure that you're utilizing the right vehicles at the right time for the right place. Again, you've probably seen this before, but we know that through using our own customer data that we've seen that Shell Telematics can help to reduce fuel consumption by 14%. in just the first couple of months of usage. And that's not even counting all those other benefits when we take into account, again, the idling, the reduction of some of those aggressive driving behaviors. It can also help you be more productive in terms of, again, not only knowing where your drivers are and, again, where to utilize it, but to really be more proactive around things like maintenance and reducing the downtime that you have with vehicles. Safety, that is a big one for Shell. It's at the forefront of everything that we do, and safety is no exception when it comes to Shell Telematics. We have lots of great safety-related, not only reports, but tools built into Shell Telematics. I'm going to call out a couple of them here in just a moment. And then security, obviously, that is another big part of what Shell does, but also offered through telematics. You can really maintain and control your expenses, what's happening across the fleet by having these extra data points and insights. A couple of other features, so I've touched on some of them, but a couple of other features I'll call out just for reference. Just a few that I haven't touched on yet. So geofencing or zones is another term that you might be familiar with. So if you think about wanting to really get a handle on where your vehicles are going, when they're entering and exiting a zone, if you're wanting to really monitor that driver performance, again, if you're wanting to just use it as an inventory management tool of wanting to make sure I know where they are. It could even be that, but it does so much more. So let's talk about, I mentioned some of the reports that we take some of those data points and we put them into a digestible format. This is a quick snapshot of what that looks like. This is just a sampling here, but we deliver that to you in a dashboard, a ready-made dashboard. So you don't have to go digging into the data. By the way, if you want to, you can. It's all there. But we have some ready-made reports that are rooted in safety, in fuel savings, in time savings, utilization, all of those things ready to go, so you can click on it or have it delivered to your inbox with a click of a button. Whatever the case is, we have it there. And I like to use this analogy. I think of telematics as kind of like a gym membership, right? We want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. We don't want it to be that you're signing up for like your gym membership in January, you have really good intentions, and by March you're like, wait, why did I sign up for that? And one of the ways we combat that is making sure that you have the visibility at your fingertips. Nothing is more than 2 clicks away, so that in just a few seconds, you're able to make an educated decision, influence policymaking, reduce costs, do all of those things that you need to do to take care of your fleet. So I touched on safety a little bit, but I'll talk about a couple of things. And this stat always really sticks out to me, that drivers, again, not only are they driving your most expensive asset, but they can influence up to 70% of the total cost of ownership. So we talked about the fuel costs being a bulk of that makeup, but the drivers themselves have a big influence. So making sure that we have safe driving behaviors by reducing speeding, seatbelt incidents, harsh braking, harsh acceleration, harsh cornering. Those things can really have an impact to your bottom line, but they can also help to improve the driver behavior, and then as a result, improve things that impact your bottom line, like your fuel costs. Now, this one's a personal favorite of mine. You may or may not be familiar with this, but through telematics technology, you're actually able to have something called collision reconstruction. So when a collision does happen, even with the safest of drivers, accidents can happen. Actually, they occur somewhere between 7 and 11 seconds, and a non-fatality based accident can sometimes cost upwards of $70,000 even. So a big impact to your bottom line. But through the Shell Telematics technology with collision reconstruction, you're able to recreate that accident with the data available right there in the portal and see the actual point of impact, including the raw accelerometer data. So really great data at your fingertips to start understanding not only what is happening, but what has happened, where you can make improvements, where you can reduce on those costs. From a compliance standpoint, which is obviously something very big in the heavy duty space, we also, through Shell Telematics, offer ELD and hours of service built right in, registered with the FMCSA. Shell Telematics is, that is. So you can rest assured that from a compliance standpoint, everything seamlessly is at your fingertips, transfers. So all of the inspections and DVIRs that the drivers are doing are right there for you. So Harry mentioned this earlier, we also have cameras integrated with Shell Telematics. If you can't tell, I've said integrated a few times, and that's because we want it to be an easy to use kind of one-stop shop so that you aren't going to multiple places to track everything. So with front and dual facing cameras that are able to detect things like driver fatigue and driver behaviors, again, impacting those bottom lines, we have integrated cameras as well. Asset trackers. So you may say, well, I have some trailers and some heavier duty equipment that goes with it. What can I do to combat that? We also have asset trackers also that seamlessly integrate, so you don't have to worry about those elements being managed somewhere else. So I want to touch on this one too. This is very much a Shell piece around that we have customer support, is what we have on the slide. But my point in sharing this is going back to that kind of gym analogy. We want to set you up for success, and we want to make sure that you're getting all the data and insights, not only delivered to you, but that you're getting the support and that best-in-class support that you need as your needs evolve. We are there for you not only at the initial stages, but on an ongoing basis, and we want to help you learn. So as things in the fleet industry evolve and change, we are making sure to keep you up to date. We actually have built right into our Shell Telematics portal, we actually have a learning hub that is chock full of videos and vignettes and gifts and different resources, so that at your fingertips you can help train your staff, your drivers, all of the team members, so that you have the latest information and tools and resources at your fingertips. One other thing I'll note is we feel very confident in Shell Telematics. So we actually offer a 90-day money-back guarantee, but we actually developed a very special promotion for today's discussion and webinar. And we're offering Shell Telematics. When you sign up and get Shell Telematics for the first time, you get free devices. So those devices that you plug into the OBD2 port, and the first 2 months of subscriptions for free as a part of attending today's webinar. So hopefully you found this to be helpful and insightful, but I'll go ahead and pause for some